Imagine you want to build a house. But instead of just driving down to the local hardware store to pick up some lumber and a box of nails, the rules of the global economy essentially dictate that you first have to buy a forest.
Right, which sounds completely
It
ridiculous.
sounds completely absurd, and then you have to build your own sawmill. Then you have to pave a road from that sawmill all the way to your empty lot, and finally you have to engineer and build your own truck just to move the wood.
Yeah, nobody would ever build a house if that were the case.
Exactly. But if you really think about it, for the last century, if you were a business trying to sell a physical product on a global scale, that is exactly what managing a supply chain felt like. You weren't allowed to just, make a great product.
You were forced to become this massive logistics expert.
Right. You had to manage ocean freight, warehousing, customs compliance, and last mile delivery. It's an exhausting, incredibly capital-intensive mess. But what if the forest, the sawmill, the trucks, and the roads just suddenly vanished as your problem?
Like, they just became this invisible background utility.
Exactly. A service you could just rent on demand with the literal click of a button.
I mean, it fundamentally breaks the math of how a business operates. And I say that in the best possible way. You are talking about the total decoupling of product creation from product distribution.
Which is huge.
It is. If you don't have to spend like 80% of your capital and brain power figuring out how to move a cardboard box from Shenzhen to Chicago, the implications for global commerce are just staggering.
And that reality is exactly why we are here today. So welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a massive paradigm-shifting announcement that dropped today. Today is May 4, 2026.
A date that I honestly think is going to be in the history books.
Oh, for sure. So Amazon just launched Amazon Supply Chain Services, or ASCS, and we're pulling a lot of our analysis today from this incredibly detailed blog post by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat titled Netizen, Physical AWS.
Yeah, that post really nails the scale of this.
It really does. So our mission for this conversation is to explore why this isn't just, a new shipping option. It's not a new tier of Prime. This is a foundational shift in the global economy. It's what everyone is calling the physical AWS moment.
Because Amazon is essentially opening up its entire globally synchronized logistics network to every single business on Earth.
Every single one. So whether you are running a massive Fortune 500 corporation or you're a one-person startup operating out of your garage, the way you buy, sell, and create physical things has fundamentally changed as of this morning.
Decades from now, economists are going to look back at today as a clear dividing line. There is the era of commerce before ASCS and the era after, because it's really crucial to understand the sheer scale of what Amazon is unlocking here.
Right. It's not a small test program.
No, not at all. We aren't just talking about a minor upgrade to their existing fulfillment services. This is the complete productization of an internal powerhouse.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when they say they are opening their full logistics network, they mean the entire behemoth. The details of the rollout are honestly mind-blowing.
They are opening everything.
Everything. They're opening up freight, so we're talking ocean, air, ground, and rail. They are opening up distribution, fulfillment, bulk warehousing, and even parcel shipping.
And it's available to any business across any industry.
Yeah.
Manufacturing, automotive, healthcare, retail.
Yeah, and the early adopters on board for day one are absolute giants. We are talking Procter & Gamble, 3M, Land's End, American Eagle.
Which is a huge signal to the market.
It really is. To me, this is like, imagine you need to move out of your apartment, and instead of renting a battered U-Haul, you're suddenly handed the keys to an entire synchronized global fleet of cargo ships, jumbo jets, and robotic warehouses, all optimized by artificial intelligence.
And that scale is exactly why companies like P&G and 3M are signing up immediately. Think about that for a second. P&G already has one of the most sophisticated supply chains on the planet.
Right, they move massive amounts of inventory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they aren't signing up because they lack logistics networks. They are signing up because nobody on Earth has a network as dense, intelligent, and relentlessly efficient as Amazon's.
Even P&G can't compete with that.
No one can. Traditional third-party logistics providers, or 3PLs, have existed for a long time, but a traditional 3PL is usually just a middleman. They rent warehouse space in Ohio, they contract with a trucking company in Texas, and they try to piece the puzzle together for you.
So it's super fragmented.
Highly fragmented.
Yeah.
What Amazon is doing with ASCS is taking the exact proprietary, hyper-optimized infrastructure they spent decades building to ensure their own retail dominance.
Yeah.
And they're basically saying to the world, here, you can plug directly into our engine.
Which brings up this concept of the physical AWS. I keep seeing this comparison in the source material, and to really grasp it, we have to kind of look backward. History is repeating itself here, almost beat for beat.
It really is. Think back to the late 90s and early 2000s. Amazon was experiencing this explosive growth as an e-commerce platform.
Right, they were just selling books and CDs back then.
Yeah, but to handle their own massive spikes in web traffic, especially around the holidays, they had to build incredibly sophisticated, deeply robust cloud server infrastructure.
Because if the site goes down, they lose millions?
Exactly. They didn't set out to become a cloud computing company. They built those server farms simply because if they didn't, their retail business would literally crash and burn.
So they were basically just solving their own massive internal headache.
Precisely. But eventually they had a realization. This massive, scalable, reliable digital infrastructure they had built was incredibly valuable entirely on its own.
Right, other people needed it too.
Yes, so they boxed it up, put an API interface on it, and sold access to it as Amazon Web Services, AWS. And that single decision democratized digital infrastructure forever.
It changed everything.
Right.
Suddenly, a college kid with a great idea for an app didn't need to go raise $2 million in venture capital just to buy physical servers and rent a climate-controlled room to keep them in.
They could just rent server space by the millisecond from Amazon. Today, AWS powers a massive portion of the entire internet. Startups, Fortune 500s, everyone uses it. It completely changed how software was built.
And so the argument in Paramenter's post is that ASCS is Amazon doing that exact same thing, but in the physical world of atoms rather than the digital world of bytes.
That's the core thesis, yeah.
But I'm stuck on this physical AWS comparison, and I have to push back a little here. Software is infinitely replicable. A packet of data doesn't get stuck in the Suez Canal when a massive cargo ship gets blown sideways by the wind.
That's very true.
Code doesn't get delayed by a snowstorm in the Midwest, and it certainly isn't bound by gravity or the physical constraints of a warehouse shelf. So can a digital business model really map perfectly onto the physical world?
It's a great question.
Moving a physical pallet of, say, heavy automotive parts from a factory in Shenzhen to an assembly line in Detroit is inherently messy. An algorithm can't solve a literal bridge collapse.
That is the ultimate skepticism, and it's entirely valid. The physical world is messy. It's subject to entropy and weather and friction.
Lots of friction.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, that messiness is exactly why this physical AWS moment is so profound. The conceptual mapping holds up because Amazon has spent over 2 decades absorbing that physical friction.
What do you mean by absorbing it?
I mean, they have built the routing algorithms to bypass the snowstorm. They have built the redundant port connections to handle the sunken ship. Yes, moving atoms is infinitely harder than moving bytes. But just as AWS let companies avoid the nightmare of maintaining server farms and hiring network engineers, ASCS lets a business entirely avoid the nightmare of global logistics.
Oh, I see.
Amazon is essentially saying, we have already solved the messiness of the physical world. Pay us a fee, and we will absorb that friction for you.
So it's not that the physical world isn't messy, it's that Amazon has built a machine specifically designed to process that mess so the seller doesn't even have to look at it.
Exactly. You just see the dashboard.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's look at how they actually built that machine, because this didn't just happen overnight. We are looking at decades of hard-won infrastructure. For a lot of smaller sellers, this evolved out of something they are already intimately familiar with, which is FBA or Fulfillment by Amazon.
Right. FBA was essentially the training ground for all of this. For years, third-party sellers have been able to send their inventory to Amazon's fulfillment centers.
Right, you ship them a box of your product, they put it on a shelf.
And when an order came in through Amazon.com, Amazon handled the picking, packing, and shipping. It was a massive success, but it was really just a localized piece of the puzzle. It was focused almost entirely on the very end of the journey, holding the item on a shelf and getting it to the customer's front door.
But ASCS connects every single layer of the supply chain. It goes way, way beyond just holding a box on a shelf.
It connects the entire global pipeline.
Yeah, it includes inbound freight directly from the factory floor in another country. It includes customs clearance. And, I mean, have you ever tried to import a shipping container? Customs is an absolute operational nightmare.
It's a massive barrier for small businesses.
Huge barrier. Plus, there is bulk storage, cross-channel distribution, and the last-mile delivery. It's the entire pipeline, end to end. And there's a crucial data point floating around today that I think completely changes the conversation. Sellers who've been piloting this end-to-end ASCS system are seeing nearly 20% higher sales.
20% is massive.
Right. Translating that into real-world business survival terms, a 20% bump in top-line revenue is not just a nice little bonus. For most businesses, especially physical product businesses with tight margins, that is the difference between scraping by and absolute market dominance.
And we really have to dissect why they are seeing that 20% increase. Because it isn't a glitch in the matrix. It really comes down to reliability, speed, and cognitive load.
Cognitive load for the business owner.
Yes. When you abstract the complexity of inbound freight and customs away from, say, a mid-sized manufacturer, you free up their capital and their focus. They aren't holding millions of dollars in buffer inventory just in case a ship gets delayed at port.
Right, because Amazon manages the flow perfectly.
Exactly. But even more importantly, you give their end consumer an Amazon-level experience. We are talking about deep visibility into tracking, 7-day-a-week delivery, and a staggeringly low error rate.
People trust Amazon delivery.
They do. When consumers know they will get the product fast and reliably, cart abandonment drops and conversion rates skyrocket. Amazon is basically allowing a small, independent company to operate with a logistical muscle of a trillion-dollar empire.
Which is incredible. And that brings us to what I think is the most mind-bending part of this entire announcement, because everything we've talked about so far, warehouses, trucks, ships, that is mostly human-driven infrastructure.
Up until now, yes.
Right. But you cannot fully grasp the ASCS announcement without looking at the futuristic tech driving this new era. The analysis out there today points out that the long-term implications of this are absolutely insane when paired with the explosion of autonomous systems. We are talking about the maturity of physical AI.
And this is the crux of why this announcement is happening now, today, in 2026. The convergence of these technologies has finally reached a tipping point.
So define physical AI for us, because people might just think of ChatGPT.
Right. When we talk about physical AI, we need to be very clear. We
Right.
aren't talking about chatbots generating text or making deep fake images. We are talking about artificial intelligence instantiated in the physical world.
Like robots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is self-driving trucks and autonomous delivery vans navigating actual city streets. It is autonomous drones managing specialized fast delivery routes. And crucially, it is humanoid robots working inside the warehouses.
Things like Tesla's Optimus.
Yes. Technologies like Tesla's Optimus humanoid robots and their autonomous semi-trucks aren't just sci-fi prototypes anymore. In 2026, they are scalable industrial tools.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's actually visualize that. Imagine stepping into an Amazon fulfillment center in this near future. It's not thousands of human workers running around with barcode scanners bringing out from the physical toll of lifting boxes all day.
Right. The human element is largely removed from the heavy lifting.
It is an entirely AI-orchestrated operation, so autonomous trucks back into the loading bays, humanoid robots seamlessly unload the pallets, automated sorting systems route the packages on conveyor belts, and autonomous vans take them to the final destination.
It runs like clockwork.
Exactly. In this system, your ability to scale a business is no longer limited by human labor shortages. It's not limited by how fast you can hire and train warehouse staff before the Christmas rush. It is limited only by how fast we can produce robots and generate the energy to power them.
That's a profound shift.
To use an analogy, it's kind of like playing a real-time strategy video game, think Age of Empires or StarCraft. In the early game, you are manually managing every single peasant, right? Chopping wood, mining gold, it takes all your attention.
You're micromanaging the supply chain.
Exactly. But suddenly you unlock this late game upgrade where resource gathering and logistics become completely automated. As the player, you never have to look at your supply lines ever again. You can focus entirely on high-level strategy, on creation, on the macro game.
That analogy works conceptually, but let's ground it in the raw economics, because the real-world consequence of that automation is where things get truly wild. What's fascinating here is what happens when you systematically remove human labor costs from the transportation and storage equation.
The costs just plummet.
They push those costs toward marginal levels. They actually approach zero. Think about it. An autonomous truck doesn't need to sleep at a rest stop for 8 hours.
It can drive 24/7.
Exactly. A humanoid robot doesn't require healthcare benefits,
Yeah.
it doesn't get repetitive strain injuries from lifting boxes, and it doesn't need to be paid time and a half for overtime.
Which triggers this massive economic concept mentioned in the source material, the deflationary flywheel.
Yes, the deflationary flywheel is the secret engine behind all of this.
Let's break the mechanics of that flywheel down for everyone because it's brilliant. So, step one, you integrate physical AI, these robots and autonomous vehicles, into the ASCS network. This makes moving goods drastically cheaper and more reliable.
Right, because the labor costs vanish.
Exactly. Because logistics is now incredibly cheap, you lower the barrier to entry for new businesses and new products. If shipping a custom heavy component costs pennies instead of $20, I can suddenly afford to start selling a much wider variety of things.
Which leads directly to step 2 of the flywheel. That lowered barrier means a massive influx of new volume entering the Amazon network.
More stuff moving around.
Right. More businesses using ASCS means more packages flowing through the system. And in any logistics network, density is king.
Density meaning how packed the trucks are.
Exactly. Higher volume drives further efficiencies. If an autonomous truck was only half full before, now it's packed to the absolute brim. That density justifies the capital expenditure to build even more automated warehouses and buy even more autonomous trucks.
And then step three is the data layer. All that incredibly diverse volume from millions of different customers generates just an absolute ocean of real-world data.
The most valuable asset they have.
Right. Amazon feeds that data into their AI models to improve demand forecasting, refine their routing algorithms to bypass traffic jams, and optimize inventory placement for everyone on the network.
Which makes the system even faster, cheaper, and more reliable.
Bringing us right back to step one. It's literally a perpetual motion machine of efficiency.
And look at Amazon's strategic positioning here. By aggressively integrating these robots into their ASCS network, they become one of the largest customers and likely deep partners for companies like Tesla.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, they are actively fueling the exact robotics industry that makes their own logistics network untouchable. It's a brilliant synergy.
So if the cost to ship this stuff really drops toward near zero, the math for starting a business fundamentally breaks. And again, in a good way. What happens to the global economy when logistics costs essentially vanish? Because for centuries, the sheer friction of moving an item from point A to point B dictated what could be sold and where.
It creates entirely new economic realities.
Oh.
Whole industries that were previously completely uneconomical due to high shipping costs suddenly become viable overnight.
Let's do a case study to really cement this because I want to make this concrete for you listening.
Right.
Think about a small hardware startup. Say you want to build a highly specialized, heavy piece of smart furniture.
Okay, a big, bulky item.
Right. 3 years ago, you run the numbers, sourcing the custom electronic touch panels from Germany, the heavy steel chassis from a foundry in Mexico, and the specialized wood from Canada, and then trying to assemble all that and ship a 150-pound object to a customer in Chicago.
The shipping costs alone would wipe out your entire profit margin.
Exactly. It's economically impossible unless you are a multi-billion-dollar corporation with localized supply chains. So you just abandon the idea. The product never exists. How does ASCS change that specific scenario?
Under the ASCS model, that barrier just vanishes. ASCS unlocks global just-in-time manufacturing for the little guy. That small hardware startup doesn't need to hold inventory. They just plug their supply chain into the ASCS API.
So Amazon orchestrates all the incoming parts.
Yes. Amazon orchestrates the ocean freight from Germany and the rail freight from Mexico to arrive precisely on the same day at a microassembly hub near the end consumer.
Wait, really? A micro hub?
Yeah. Because moving goods is incredibly cheap and handled by AI, you can afford to hold highly customized modular inventory in these local micro-fulfillment centers. So when the customer in Chicago clicks buy, the parts are assembled locally by robots and driven via autonomous van to their door the very next day.
That is wild. It fundamentally changes the equation of innovation. When a founder isn't burning millions of dollars on logistics, shipping delays, and warehouse leases, that capital gets poured back into research, development, and product quality.
It completely levels the playing field.
It does. But looking at this sweeping change, I have to play devil's advocate for a second. We are talking about one single company controlling the physical flow of global commerce. What does this mean for Amazon's rivals? We keep hearing this phrase in the source material, APIs for atoms.
Yes. An API is the connective tissue of the digital world. It's how software talks to other software seamlessly. Amazon is essentially creating that seamless integration for physical goods.
APIs for atoms. I love that phrasing.
It's very accurate. ASCS offers a unified console. You plug your business software, say your Shopify storefront or your custom ERP system, directly into ASCS. Suddenly, your physical inventory moves with the fluidity of data. You have end-to-end visibility, and you can pool your inventory across all your sales channels simultaneously.
But doesn't this create a terrifying monopoly? I mean, if Amazon becomes the sole operating system for physical goods, the universal API for atoms, how can any competitor possibly match that? It feels like they are building an unassailable moat.
This raises an important question about platform power. To understand how deep this moat really is, we again have to look at the AWS playbook.
Okay, let's go back to cloud computing.
AWS didn't win the cloud wars simply because it offered raw computing power. I mean, Google and Microsoft had servers too. AWS won because it offered an incredibly sticky ecosystem.
Sticky meaning hard to leave.
Exactly. It offered specialized tools, security protocols, integrated databases, and a platform that developers simply didn't want to leave once they were plugged in. The switching costs were too high. ASCS is engineering the exact same lock-in effect for physical inventory.
Walk me through how that lock-in actually works for a brand in the real world.
Let's say a major apparel brand integrates its entire global supply chain into ASCS. They're using Amazon's advanced AI to forecast demand. So Amazon's AI tells them, hey, you need 10,000 winter coats in Chicago by November 1st and 5,000 in Denver.
Based on weather data and past sales, I assume.
Right. And Amazon automatically positions those physical goods closer to the demand before the customer even orders them. That brand is then using ASCS to fulfill orders coming from their own direct-to-consumer website, orders from their Amazon Marketplace storefront, and they're even using ASCS to restock their physical brick-and-mortar retail stores.
So it's all one unified pool of inventory managed by Amazon's brain.
Exactly. So if that brand decides they are unhappy with Amazon's fees and wants to switch to a competitor, pulling that plug becomes incredibly painful. They would have to rebuild the forecasting, the distribution networks, the multi-channel routing from scratch.
So Amazon's moat isn't just their vast warehousing footprint, although, millions of square feet of concrete is a pretty good moat.
It definitely helps.
But the real moat is the intelligence.
Exactly. It's their proven execution, their unmatched physical density, and the sheer intelligence of their network. Competitors simply won't have the volume of real-world data required to train their own physical AI to the same level of routing efficiency.
To fully grasp the gravity of this launch, we have to look beyond just Amazon. The analysis of this event by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat is embedded in a very specific moment in time. He has been tracking what he calls the convergence age.
Right. This is a major theme in his writing.
It is. This is the idea that multiple exponential technologies, AI, robotics, energy, neurotech, logistics, are all maturing at the exact same time, and they are feeding into each other. And you can see that convergence happening right in the news cycle surrounding this May 4th announcement.
The surrounding context is vital. If you treat ASCS as just an isolated corporate press release, you miss the forest for the trees. You have to look at the other headlines hitting on the exact same day.
Right. On one hand, you have Salesforce launching Agentforce operations to completely overhaul enterprise AI. You have MIT publishing a major breakthrough on mapping the human brain during sleep. You have smuggled Starlink dishes successfully beating internet blackouts in Iran.
It paints a picture of a world moving at just breakneck speed.
It really does. So how do these connect?
Well, if we synthesize those headlines, a very clear, cohesive theme emerges, which is the rise of agentic AI.
Agentic meaning AI that acts as an agent.
Exactly. For a long time, AI was just a conversational oracle. You asked it a question, it gave you text. But agentic AI is different. It is AI that actually takes action. It executes complex, multi-step tasks autonomously across different software systems without human prompting.
Wow, okay.
So when you look at the Salesforce headline about Agentforce autonomously fixing enterprise workflows, you realize that this kind of software is the invisible digital layer that will orchestrate the physical world.
It's the brain communicating with the hands. So the agentic AI is the manager sitting in the cloud, and the Optimus robot and the ASCS network are the workers out in the field.
Precisely. The autonomous trucks routing themselves around traffic, the robots moving the ASCS packages, they're all governed by these agentic software systems. And technologies like Starlink provide the unbreakable, low-latency global communications grid required to keep millions of autonomous robots constantly synced with the cloud anywhere on Earth.
Even in remote areas.
Exactly. So the ASCS announcement is simply the physical heavy industry manifestation of this broader AI and robotics convergence.
The author actually ties this highly technical Amazon announcement into a deeply philosophical, almost spiritual view of technological progress. He writes extensively about a concept called Kalkiism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance.
It's a very unique perspective on technology.
It is. And he views this extreme physical automation not as some dystopian job killer to be feared, but as a necessary unlock for human thriving. He references his own book, Lumina AI, The Trillion-Dollar Sun, to talk about this coming abundance.
It's a fascinating lens to look through, and honestly, whether you subscribe to the spiritual terminology or not, the underlying economic argument for abundance is mathematically sound.
How so?
Well, poverty and scarcity are, in many ways, logistical problems.
Really? Just
A
logistics?
huge part of it, yes.
Yeah.
If the cost of our most basic needs, manufacturing, moving, and storing goods, drops dramatically because we have removed human labor and friction from the supply chain, the baseline standard of living globally has the potential to rise exponentially.
Because everything becomes incredibly cheap.
Exactly. Human capital is freed up from the back-breaking drudgery of logistics, and that human energy can be deployed toward solving much harder scientific problems, or simply enriching human life.
Which brings us to our final major theme today, the micro-level impact. We've talked a lot about the macroeconomics, the deflationary flywheels, the global trade implications, and the wild technology of humanoid robots.
The big picture stuff.
Right. But let's bring it down to earth. So what does this all mean for the individual creator, the entrepreneur, or the small business owner listening to this right now?
The core takeaway for entrepreneurs hidden inside this massive infrastructure announcement is incredibly liberating. It basically says, stop worrying about the atoms.
Stop worrying about the atom.
Yes, your competitive advantage is no longer your ability to negotiate a cheaper shipping rate than the guy next door. The message is to focus entirely on the product, the brand, the innovation, and the customer experience. You leave the heavy lifting, the actual literal heavy lifting, of moving boxes across oceans to Amazon.
This is being heralded as the biggest unlock for physical goods since the invention of the standardized shipping container in the mid-20th century.
Oh, absolutely.
Just think about how the container ship revolutionized global trade. You could seamlessly move a standardized box from a truck to a crane to a ship to a train without ever unpacking the goods inside.
It was a revolution in efficiency.
It was. And ASCS is doing that, but with a massive artificial intelligence layer on top, managing the contents of the box down to the individual CRO. The ultimate promise here is that the friction of physical operations is approaching zero.
This is where knowledge must be actively applied. If you are a business leader today, you need to sit down and think critically about how supply chain management as a service changes your specific industry over the next decade.
Because it changes everything.
It does. If you no longer need $10 million in venture capital to build out a nationwide distribution network, the barriers to entry in your field just collapsed.
Which means a lot more competition.
That means way more competition, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also means unprecedented opportunity. You can scale a brilliant physical product globally, practically overnight, with a team of 3 people in a co-working space.
That is just wild to think about.
It fundamentally shifts the center of gravity in business away from operational scale and toward pure product excellence and brand resonance.
We have covered massive ground today. We started with a single seismic announcement on May 4th, 2026, Amazon, opening its end-to-end supply chain to the entire world.
A truly historic day.
We explored how this mirrors the digital revolution of AWS, transforming a messy logistical nightmare into a plug-and-play physical utility. We dove deep into the deflationary flywheel, dissecting how physical AI, from humanoid robots to autonomous trucks, drives the marginal cost of moving goods towards zero.
We really got into the nuts and bolts.
You did. We looked at the unassailable moat Amazon is building through platform lock-in and APIs for atoms, and we contextualized all of this within the broader convergence age of agentic AI and an impending era of material abundance.
It represents a profound structural shift. We are moving from a world where business is defined by managing scarcity and physical friction to a world where physical infrastructure is as abundant, invisible, and seamless as electricity.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. If the cost of moving physical goods truly plummets towards zero, thanks to physical AI and ASCS, the friction of the material world is basically vanishing. So I leave you with this. If logistics, manufacturing, and global supply chains become an invisible, nearly free utility, if absolutely anyone, anywhere, can make and ship anything globally in an instant without a second thought, does human creativity, branding, and storytelling become the only truly scarce resources left in the business world?
That is the big question for the next decade.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.